It's really interesting. I've always been very, very critical of more and conservatism in Europe and North America is different, and Canada is somewhere in between the U.S. and Europe. But I've been for many, many years telling them they need to stop trying to motivate. Remember those four pillars of motivation. Motivating voter bases around from a spreadsheet. They're good with economic policy. Whether they actually follow through with it is a different story. But their messaging around cuts and sound economic principles, that doesn't resonate with 95% of the population. You need something aspirational. That's what the other side is very good at doing, painting a future, at least they used to be. They used to be good at painting a picture of the world of being a more positive future that we can go to. Now, here we are, where we have something that is in the wheelhouse of more conservative-minded people because it's financial, it's economic. Like, that's supposed to be your area of expertise. So it's both financial and economic, and it's aspirational. It paints a brighter future for everybody. It enforces freedom. So they would be ridiculous to not go after the one aspirational endeavor in their wheelhouse of politics that has emerged over the past, I don't know how many decades. If they don't capture it and embrace it and understand how to integrate it into their policy structure, then they deserve to lose every election forever, because people they're not electing you yes, they're electing for cuts, and I get on the conservative side, but people broadly, they want their lives to be secure and have more opportunities in the future. And Bitcoin was the best communicator for it if you knew how to communicate around Bitcoin.
That makes a whole lot of sense. And it's also interesting how you mentioned that Bitcoin is kind of on both spectrums, because I have friends in Bitcoin that are further on the left than me, and friends that are further on the right than me. Like it's on both spectrums. I have friends in Bitcoin, and we had even like what's it called, Bitcoin for Harris or something like that. So like we even had with Kamala Harris some kind of small movement that was definitely not as loud as the Bitcoin movement for Trump, but we had something going on. Maybe it was called Crypto for Harris. Maybe it was not specific to Bitcoin. I'm not sure about that, but there's on both sides, there are definitely people in Bitcoin. And every time I made with the guy from either Bitcoin or Crypto for Harris an interview, and I made a lot of interviews with people from the Trump side. And when I had someone from the Harris team on, the Trump people were like, oh, how can you be a Bitcoiner if you're a Democrat? And then when I had the other side on, Democrats were like, how can you be a Bitcoiner when you are for Trump? Like it's really weird how this thing, we connected to values that we have and mirrored on Bitcoin, even though Bitcoin does not have a political mindset, or like doesn't prefer any candidates or anything like that. So in a weird way, it's a really great unifier, because it's neutral. Exactly. It just is.
Yeah, I've had this conversation with people on really the extreme opposite end of politics. And I remember one specific conversation. I said, listen, I like you, but boy, you couldn't be more different than I in terms of my political worldview. So how do we communicate to your people? What can I do to help you? Or what strategies can we can think of to work together to get your people on board? Because my people are already on that journey. I can tell you what's worked for us. Tell me what you think can work for you, and if there's something we can do on our end to help you orange pill your people. That is the epitome of unity, finding that base layer that we're all together on. And I love those conversations. I really do.
Do you think we should, as Bitcoiners, get more active in politics?
I don't know. I think maybe to a degree, maybe focusing on Bitcoin itself. But it's like we've shifted to how things were culturally in the past, where, you'd go, I remember my parents would have dinner with their friends, for example. And the two topics of conversation that nobody would ever discuss other than like a quick comment here and there, would be politics and religion, right? Because those are people's personal things. They come up to a worldview, and when you try to influence and change people, that can get to a very heated discussion. So I feel like if it's focused on Bitcoin and freedom and free speech and allowing us all to protect those freedoms in the future, great. When it comes down to like granular policies and stuff, I'm not so sure. And maybe that's because I've seen how it works behind the scenes. I understand the mechanisms and incentives and how voter blocks are manipulated, whereas the average person doesn't. And I try to talk a little bit about that in politics to tell people what you see is not reality. That's not what's actually happening behind the scenes. So why are you arguing about that? And so I think if we just keep it more singularly focused or focused on the area of Bitcoin and freedom and like, listen, you have your political position. You want to have a conversation one-on-one is a different story. But in terms of being politically active, probably not, because everybody in politics knows the most powerful voting bloc is the single issue voter, because they're impossible to sway if you drop or you try to negotiate on their one issue. So that's why they always have a slate of policies, because if you have something that's so vital to your primary policy, let's say it's Bitcoin, and they say, well, we can talk about Bitcoin, but can't really put anything in writing right now. But here are 10 other policies to distract you that are easy, that we probably won't even do anyways, but we're going to say we're going to do it. Then you end up compromising beyond your principles, and it's not your fault. It's just kind of that's the structure of how they message in politics. But if you are a hard ass on just Bitcoin and Bitcoin only, don't distract me with all the other stuff that I don't really know or care about because I'm not in politics, then I think we would be much stronger. So I dip into a whole bunch of other areas of politics. That's because there's other personal concerns for me, things I witnessed on the university campuses with my business, and certain files that I just became very informed on. So I'll talk about the few things that I really know politically behind the scenes, because I've seen things that other people will not have seen.
I do love the watches from Coin Vigilante, but today I have a very special message, not from me, but from the CEO himself, Carlos from Coin Vigilante. Let's hear him.
To all the Robin Seyr podcast community, I'm Carlos Estrada from Coin Vigilante, and we're sponsors of the show, and we're going to give you a very special discount exclusive to you, 10% off your order at coinvigilante.com when you use Robin at checkout. We have really nice watches that you guys can buy right now for 10%. This is a transparency edition, beautiful watch. These watches are worn in over 55 countries and counting. This discount is just for you, exclusive to the Robin Seyr podcast. We have limited editions, we have limited productions. These watches come in very nice packaging, boxing material, and they are collector's item for Bitcoiners only. Enjoy the discount. Thanks for supporting the show and Coin Vigilante.
The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I finally and officially mine Bitcoin. This is not just something to stack more Satoshis, but it's most importantly also to support the network. Individual miners are the ones that keep the Bitcoin network decentralized. And by the way, you get KYC free Bitcoin. That's That's why I use simple mining. I get an actual proper Bitcoin miner. They set it up for me. They repair it if it breaks down. And most importantly, they let me choose the pool and even connect my own full node. I'm completely sovereign and I'm completely in control, and I can sign up with Ocean, no account needed. I just give them a Bitcoin address and then there's mining going on. No KYC, nothing. So if you're ready to mine Bitcoin, go to simplemining.io, tell them you come from Robin, and let's mine Bitcoin together. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called microseed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today. And you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. Again, that's microseed.io to get your last backup tool you ever need. Is there a single issue? Because I see a lot of Bitcoiners actually saying like, oh, whatever party is the one that I think is most beneficial for Bitcoin, I vote for. Like I see that in Bitcoin more than in many other communities. Is that the reason why maybe Donald Trump hurt them so early on? Because it's not only a loud group, it's also a group that's not really looking at anything else. So you kind of have to go to the Bitcoin conference. You cannot sway them with some economics or anything else.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it was, that they realized most political parties, what they struggle with is the people who are disengaged and don't vote. Like that's the big cherry they can go for. Because they like when people talk about, I'm going to vote this way in my district, whatever, they already know how you're going to vote. Everything is mapped out through these actuarial tables. That's why they're knocking on doors. They're just knocking on doors as part of this GOTV voter ID strategy. So your individual vote really isn't going to sway things because they already know how you're going to vote. But if you have this whole swath of people that feel disenfranchised, that aren't motivated to vote, they don't get out, but there's only one issue that they care about, it'd be an idiot not to go after that, because just give them their one issue, and hey, that one issue actually aligns with all of our values. That's why I couldn't understand how people on the other side, let's say in the U.S., for example, on the Democratic side, couldn't see that. Like it's just one issue, and then you'd all be able to capture votes within that space. But I think it's at this point it's been solidified on, I call it, the centrist, maybe center right. I don't like that. The libertarian / conservative, freedom thinking, independent people that might be socially liberal, get out of my business, but I do want, hard conservative economic policies. I think that's the space that has really captured Bitcoin because there's the most obvious alignment. And listen, I could make the argument for Bitcoin for people on the total opposite end. Like if I went on their podcast and we just talked about their value system and certain ones that maybe I don't agree with, but I can make the best arguments for them to sell it to their people, which is what they need to do. And that's what I love about Bitcoin. There's something for absolutely everyone. And I've said this, to people, trying to explain this to people on the more center right part of things, to say that it's powerful for the other side. And the perfect example of it is, and maybe I have this, framing because I've lived a lot of my life in the third world, that, half the world doesn't have access to a bank account. They're poor in certain Latin American countries because you're just not allowed to get a bank account. Try to get a bank account in Colombia or Ecuador. It's a nightmare. if you live there just to get a bank account. Well, now here you go. You have both a currency and a bank account for the poorest people in certain civilization, well, poorest people in the world. Despite all the upward mobility of the past 2 decades, there's still a lot of, towns where it's all pobres, all impoverished people. And the reason they are is because they can't accumulate any wealth and the instability of their currencies. So what do? If you are middle class I remember seeing this in Mexico 15 years ago. If you were middle class, what would you do? Well, you would buy not one car, maybe you'd buy a car and a truck, or you would buy all sorts of little assets, extra furniture. And I remember saying to somebody, like, just buy one. And they go, no, because if anything happens to the peso, then I have things I can sell and barter. And that is very difficult for people in the West to understand that mindset, but that is prevalent in Latin America. So you add that to the lowest class of people who also they don't have a method of savings. That's why they're perpetually poor. Well, now they can have a bank in their phone, and it doesn't matter if they're saving 20,000 pesos or 20 pesos, depending on the country that you're in. They now finally have a savings mechanism, and they don't have to waste it on extra nonsense and barter if they don't have access to cash. And this is my plea to people on the left. This is so important to understand. I know their intentions are mostly good. They want to help people, and they want to help more impoverished people. The right wing is more about systemizations. They want to build systems, and somebody has to do it on their own. Okay, fine. But you have a tool there to save people in the developing world and the third world to allow them to build upward mobility. It's Bitcoin. So please embrace it and reach out to people in developing countries and help them absorb it, because that's going to change their lives.
Which brings me to the next topic, and I fully agree with that, of the importance of financial freedom. I thought a lot about that, and I feel like without financial freedom, you cannot have any other freedom, as we've seen with the freedom convoy, especially. Like, freedom of speech is great, but if they cut off your bank account and your ability to make your voice heard, it's really hard. Do you agree with like the financial freedom kind of being the foundation to all other freedoms?
I think financial freedom is freedom of speech, and freedom of speech is a prerequisite to having a society that is free broadly. If you don't have freedom of speech, then you'll never have any sort of freedom. So I don't distinguish between the two, financial freedom and freedom of speech. You hear these arguments all the time about free speech. I think one of the problems we deal with in the West right now is, and a lot of people don't understand how this works and the mechanisms behind the scenes, and I get it, so sometimes they get a little upset. But Western countries right now are suffering a very severe degree of political entryism from adversarial actors towards Western countries. And what are they doing? They're using, the freedom of speech in the United States, and they're using financial freedom to weaponize and brainwash large swaths of the population to get them to become what's called okophobic. So xenophobic is you don't like people from the outside. Okophobia is when you hate your own culture. And they're trying to fuel that sentiment. And that's why you're seeing the pushback from people who want to become more nationalistic, right? So that all gets very complex and messy. So that's the complication that we have to navigate around in terms of financial freedom. Like, if for me, if we lived in a perfect world and I was the omnipotent ruler of the world, what I would say is all NGOs and government institutions need to use they need to use Bitcoin on a ledger, and that needs to be publicly available for everyone. So there's two sides of this trade, I guess is the way to describe it. And we'll take freedom of speech / financial freedom as the example. free speech is for the individual. It's not for the government. It's for the individual person. So on the other side of that trade is, and along with freedom of speech, I would pair the presumption of innocence. So the free speech and the presumption of innocence is to the individual. But the presumption, what's the opposite of that trade? It's the presumption of guilt. And if we don't see full transparency from government institutions, then I think by default, they need to be presumed guilty of whatever they're accused of, right? Again, that's not for individuals, that's for government infrastructure. And the way to solidify and strengthen the credibility of government institutions is have all their finances on a public ledger, public blockchain like Bitcoin. So that way there's no more, there's no more cloak of ambiguity. People don't know. And people in government hate that because, corruption is human nature, unfortunately. But I think that's an important framing we need to understand. I don't think people outside of the political class, I don't think that's a right or left wing issue. I think that's just a individual issue versus the mechanics of corruption within politics. But yeah, I'm sure people will argue with me on that.
It's super interesting because the one thing I thought about now is how you observed Elon Musk coming into the government and this whole thing with Donald Trump, because I think some people say Donald Trump is an outsider to politics, but he has been in office, he has been in politics. I don't know how much outsider he is, but Elon Musk, you could actually argue he's a true outsider. I mean, who is a true outsider to politics? Probably nobody, but he's a very unconventional politician. Let's say it like that. How did you observe the whole thing where he kind of tried to make big things, and then when he saw that it's not that easy, he just went out? And there's the whole thing with the blue eye and all the things, but just the things that we have observed, how do you look at that?
He experienced what I and other more entrepreneurial-minded people experienced in politics. It's the reason I had lots of opportunities in politics. They could have carved out ridings for me. If I played the games and just lied the way they wanted me to lie to make the lobbyists happy, yeah, I could have been part of that. But I have no interest in lying to people. And, that's not the entrepreneurial framework of the world. So what he experienced, I believe, is exactly what the rest of us in that framing experience. We went in and we thought government and these institutions are about practical solutions. And this is why there was so much pushback for Trump as well, because you can see Trump, like him or hate him, is more of a pragmatic framing. That's why he changes his mind. That is not tolerated in government. No. It is very, very tribal, because there's all sorts of incentive mechanisms and alliances that people don't see and don't know that's going on behind the scenes. And so many deals that are brokered over long periods of time. And that has to do with campaign financing or their exit strategy from politics. So it gets very complicated and murky. And I think what Elon did is he got in with, I don't want to say naive. I think he understood, at that point he understood, largely how government works. I think what his mistake was understanding that those people would change and work alongside with him. And, the catalyst moment I saw, and listen, I like Trump on a lot of things. There's a few things I disagree with. I think he's more of a necessary outcome right now. Not evil, but a necessary outcome, given how far we've gone on politics. And I had a lot of sympathy for Elon when he decided to get involved, I think for positive motivations, for good reasons. We saw him treat out during the trucker convoy, Canadians truckers rule. And I've told the story about a mysterious donation from a user named liar.com. And that domain was registered to somebody by the name of Elon Musk. So I think this trucker convoy got a lot of people who just didn't care and wanted to avoid politics. It just forced them to start paying attention. And so, like every other discipline, he thinks, well, I'm going to get involved and I'm going to help change it. But there's the human nature factor. And, when I give him a lot of credit. I know the libertarians don't like him because of, how he made his money. I get that, but let's get beyond that. And let's say he got involved, he created Doge, which is an unfortunate name, especially since that, coin, but I wish he would drop it. But he got involved, and he understood that we need to cut the government. He said to Vivek Ramaswamy very famously, no, it doesn't need to be cut by 75%. It needs to be cut by 80% at least, at the very least. And so he put all this effort and emotional energy and time away from his work to get involved and to go the direction of Javier Milei and try to bring that school of thought into the U.S. government. And what sacrifice did he make? Well, they started burning his business.
Thank you for watching this video. This was only a snippet of the podcast. And if you want to watch the full episode and get all of the context of this episode, you can click right here or here. Oh, maybe also here.